Hey everyone, it's Ken Schmidt. I'm the CEO and founder of TurningPoint Executive Search, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Michael Husted. He's our recent placement as the operations director down at Stapleton Group in Solana Beach. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. And we thought we'd kind of share a little bit of the experience that both our firm had as well as kind of Michael had on the candidate side, being, kind of in an interview process and being hired in a situation where, everything is virtual. With COVID, things have changed around dramatically over the last several months. So I'm going to let Michael talk just a little bit about kind of his experience coming on board and really kind of being interviewed and going through the whole process to make a decision during COVID.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for having me. Yeah, it was a unique experience to say the least. I think, I hate to say this, but I often say it a lot these days, is I'm one of the, I guess, lucky people that benefited from COVID happening and finding a great opportunity and being able to transition into a company that's just remarkable and provides so much growth potential for me in moving forward in the future. But as far as going back to the interview process, it was set up pretty well. And I like to thank Raquel and your team over at Turning Point, very much hand holding all through the process, making sure that I knew exactly what to expect, what to anticipate, what the company was looking for, what I needed to prepare for. And really did a great job preparing me in that aspect for virtual interviews. In my past, I had never really done a virtual interview. I don't think many of us really had that luxury or opportunity to do so. Moving into the actual interviews, they were good. I think that, as good as you can be on a virtual call, you do have those little nuances and delays and, bandwidth issues that come up time to time. But I think you just learn to go with the punches on that. And I think that was a good alternative to being able to meet in person. Fortunately, I was able to meet in person as we got further down the process there. But I think a good way of both weeding out candidates as well as providing employers the opportunity to maybe reach more candidates in an environment where they typically wouldn't have the opportunity to do so. I think that provided a great resource to being able to do virtual interviews.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think the very end of the process was you and the CEO, David, kind of meeting in the conference room at opposite ends of the conference
Yeah,
table and having that
they rolled
final
out.
kind of face-to-face sit down.
Absolutely. They rolled out the red carpet. They had all the doors propped wide open. They had water waiting for me. They had, us 12 feet apart at the end of the table. So yeah, they did a great job in taking everything into consideration. I think that's necessary now, particularly with just the unease of what's tomorrow's going to bring and what this virus actually is. So I think that definitely was a huge benefit and comfort for me being able to meet in person.
And did you find yourself asking different questions or more questions because you didn't have that chance to meet in person in the beginning? So you kind of I don't know, kind of were more selective in terms of the things that you talked about, in the initial virtual interviews.
Yeah, I think from my experience, at least, the virtual interviews were precise. They were, are we a good fit? Does my background match the company? Does the company match what I'm looking for in my next position? And that was, we got into, the nitty gritty once we had a couple interviews virtually down the line, but I got to meet with a bunch of different individuals at the company, which gave me a different perspective on what their view of the company is, what this position looked like in their eyes, and what my role and responsibility would be if I were to be able to get the opportunity. So taking care of that part of it really helped me then prepare for the actual in-person interview, which was more experience related and focused on my background as opposed to just everything jumbled up in one big interview. So it was nice to be able to separate that. And I don't know if that was by design or just the way it played out, but I think it worked in my benefit, at least for me be able to prepare and to come up with great responses and to be able to actually have good questions, to provide the company as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, yeah, definitely kind of the theme around all this these days is kind of being flexible, and it's a very fluid situation, right? So even knowing kind of how you're going to interview on one step, being ready to switch gears if need be. We have some clients that have even talked actually about doing kind of a walk and talk interview, where it's a walk at the beach or a walk around wherever, just to have a
Absolutely.
conversation and be, kind of side by side versus face to face, but still be in a way where you can actually meet in person. So everybody's being very flexible these days.
Another area when we're talking about being able to pivot and be able to be to change, your thought process and your normal experience on the interview.
Mhm.
I think that's good, and I think that helps from an employer standpoint to be able to look and say, hey, this employee is okay with shifting gears quickly, and
Mhm.
this employee is okay with technology and being able to understand and adapt to change. So from an employer standpoint, I think it's great, but also from an employee standpoint, like I'd mentioned briefly before, you may be available to more opportunities now,
Mhm.
and you may, just it may open more doors, and so I think it's a win-win really when you look at it from an interviewing process.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So do you think, as you build out your team eventually down the road also, do you feel like you will kind of go through the process a little differently, being on the interviewer side versus being the interviewee, having gone through this experience yourself?
I think you have to really, if we're being honest with each other right now. I don't see any end in sight for this, unfortunately. So at least through the end of the year. But yeah, we are actually growing our team out as we speak, and we've had two new hires come on, and they were both hybrid interviews. I actually didn't even meet the one person until the first day in the office. So, um, yeah, long answer short here. Absolutely. I think you have to be able to do that in the future. And we're definitely going to be doing
Yeah. Well, I think one of the changes also will be that, job descriptions and telling a story over the phone has always been, a big part of hiring in general. But I think, because there are fewer opportunities to connect and build that rapport, for candidates to really feel interested and be compelled to consider making a job change, that story has to be written out a little bit more effectively, perhaps, in a job description. And those differentiators that's going to compel someone to change job have to be well articulated in the very beginning, I think, also.
that. Absolutely. Um, for me, that was outlined for me from the beginning very clearly, and I think that, like you said, it's very important for an employer to tell that story about what the job is, why the need for the job, and what the goals and expectations are. And I think
Hmm.
from that helps the employee or candidate um, be able to understand if it's going to be a good fit. And I think those first couple conversations virtually can help weed out candidates that may not be a good fit for either side, but also then provide the next steps for those that are.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that companies will be more likely to consider hiring remote workers versus what they were maybe 6 months ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends on the industry,
Hmm.
obviously,
Sure.
and it depends on the size of the company. I have friends that work for the big tech companies up in NorCal, and they may never go back to the office.
Right. Yeah.
Just the sheer quantity of people, you just can't keep the distance at this time. And then I have small companies that realize that they can pivot, and they maybe are more efficient working in a remote
Hmm.
environment. From the
Sure.
employer, they get to save money on office space costs and all the overhead that's associated with that. And for the employee, they get to work from a more comfortable environment and maybe pajamas and a backwards hat. So
Right. Exactly.
I think it depends on the situation. Obviously, I don't have any children yet, but if I did, that would make things a little bit more complicated.
Sure.
If
Sure.
I have a little guy or a girl running around, and my wife's at work, how am I supposed to get my job done
Right. Yeah.
effectively?
Exactly. Right.
So I think there's a little tug of war that's going to be played. Employers are, if they have a great candidate and that candidate is required to work from home, I think they might have to be able to have a flex schedule and to be a little bit more lenient with things.
Mhm.
But also, the negative that comes from the candidate or the employee side is you may have to be on a couple extra hours a day, and
Right. Right.
so and that's kind of is it worth it to be able to work from home to
Pros and
then,
cons.
have your phone ringing at 10 o'clock at night,
Right, exactly. Well, I mean,
so I don't
all
know
the
if,
articles and surveys and analyses that I'm reading out there are talking about how people are actually working longer hours now than they were when they're in the office, because work is always right there. It's easy to go and do this or get this one task
absolutely.
done or this one job done.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, a big thing was commuting up in Los Angeles, and, that was a drain.
Exactly.
And there's no way around it. But now, I have the luxury of living a mile from my office, and, like we talked about, I just walked home from work today.
Right,
I'm trying
exactly.
to,
It's perfect.
trying to be, healthy. But no, I think, reducing commutes for people, in all seriousness, I think that's a huge mental improvement. I think people might be willing to put in that extra hour or two per day for their employers if they don't have to
Mhm.
spend that time in a car.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So as a last question, any advice that you might give to either candidates and or to companies that are involved in the hiring process right now, given how things have changed so dramatically?
Yeah, I think really the biggest thing is be flexible, on both sides of the fence. I think, just because someone isn't sitting in front of you doesn't mean they're not capable of doing the job. And I think that'll challenge employers to look at the way they're conducting business. And from an employee standpoint, I think really it extends the reach of opportunities for them. And maybe you can convince an employer maybe easily or more easily than you would before that you're a good fit from a remote standpoint than if you
Mhm.
were actually there in person. So I think it's going to be good. I think the work environments are going to change on both sides of the fence, and hopefully, we can get more people into some more seats.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing your insights and your experience with us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.